Hello there friends, currently there is nothing really to talk about in the pro scene, so it's the perfect time to discuss the new CLOUD9 roster. In just a week, ESL Pro League begins, probably the last major championship for CSGO. Right now, all the teams are in thorough preparations, gathering for boot camps and analyzing mistakes from Cologne and Gamers8. So I decided to provide you with an analysis of the new CLOUD9 lineup, much like I did with Navi. We've already seen a considerable amount of matches, identified both weak and strong points, so let's break down these aspects thoroughly. Please remember, this is purely my opinion, so if you disagree, feel free to express your thoughts in the comments. Only this way we can come to right conclusions. Without further ado, let's get straight to it. We start with the strong points of the new CLOUD9 lineup. The first strong side: all players are among the best in their positions. Clearly, this is the most evident advantage of the new roster. All players are in outstanding form, possibly even at the zenith of their careers, making it perfect time to showcase their skill sets. Let's take it step by step. Starting with Shiro, he is undeniably one of the strongest snipers in the pro scene. Last year he ranked in the top 3 globally. Only Zyvo and Simple were at an unreachable level, but the question is, who among regular individuals could even come close to them? This year Mathieu is continuing his dominance and is already set to become the world's #1. There's no need to discuss anything here. He won a major, consistently earns MVP awards, and his team is a frequent visitor to the grand finals of the most prestigious tournaments. He stands several notches above the rest, both statistically and in terms of trophies. As for the battle for the second place, it's a real competition. Currently 3 players are displaying roughly equivalent levels: Nico, Shiro and Device. The year is not over yet, but most likely the second place will be secured by Nikola Kovac, while Shiro will likely once again gain the honorable bronze. As for Simple, he's currently performing at around the top 5 level globally. Surely much can change by the end of the year. Manesi might improve, or Simple might regain his previous form and start winning trophies. Regardless, Shiro should unquestionably secure his place in the top 5, making CLOUD9 possess one of the world's best players. Next, Exile. Last year he became the best rifler, surpassing even Nico, which is quite astonishing to be honest. However, this year Sergey isn't performing as remarkably. Yes, his level is still exceedingly high, ranking in the top 10 in 2023, but he's not as exceptional compared to others anymore. But you know, Nico just wasn't AFK the whole year, he is doing some extraordinary numbers right now. And Spinks has integrated remarkably well into Vitality and manages to secure frags even with Zyvo on board. Staven and Robs are super consistent. Hunter has elevated his game too. All in all, Sergey faces significant competition. Additionally, don't forget about his roles. He's a passive player, a lurker. He often has to do the dirty work. In this aspect, he remains one of the best. Perhaps Spinks and Robs could contend with him for this title as well. And another plus, the year isn't over yet. Things might change once more. Next is Hobbit. He came incredibly close to making the top 20 last year, and in 2021 he was ranked as high as 6th. That was the peak of his career, but now Hobbit's performance has somewhat dropped. He still resides in the top 30, but currently at the 24th spot among all pro players. However, he has taken on new roles and he doesn't need to frag as much as before. If we compare him to any other support player who isn't playing star roles but is just doing their job, then Hobbit is easily within the top 10. Abai is probably the least star-studded player in the new lineup, yet it's difficult to label him as a weak link. He performs at the same level as players like Hunter, Magisk and Twists, purely based on statistics. Can you call these players weak? I certainly can't. So once again, CLOUD9 boasts of one of the best players in their respective position. Now onto Perfecto, the newcomer to the team. There's not much to say here. He's the best support B player in all of CSGO, incredibly consistent, confident and unmatched in clutch situations. When the news came about the $2 million for Electronic and Perfecto, many analysts stated that this price was primarily for Perfecto. If Denis is a specific player who might not fit into just any team, then Ilya is what everyone needs. In reality, he can enhance any lineup. Who doesn't need a perfect support B player right now? Except for Vitality, of course. Any other teams would snatch Perfecto if given the chance. Indeed, not considering language barriers, only numbers and the game itself. Thorin even calls Perfecto the best player in his position, and from the initial matches of Cloud9 we've seen that there are very few concerns about Ilya, just as it was in Navi. Last but not least, in this top 5 is Electronic. You all know about Denis. For the past 5 years he's been one of the most consistent players and strongest riflers. However, everything changed when Electronic became the in-game leader last year. Since then he hasn't been able to enter the top rankings. Most likely we won't see him in a new HLTV article in January 2024, but when comparing Electronic to other in-game leaders he clearly stands out. Alongside Blamev, they outperform many other tier 1 players. Electronic is among the top 3 best fragging in-game leaders in the world, just behind Blamev, who recently took on this role, and of course Cadian. Plus, judging by the first matches of Cloud9, we can see that Denis is taking on all the aggressive and challenging roles and excelling at them. He can single-handedly open this center on Ancient or win a clutch situation. In conclusion, as we can see, all players in the new Cloud9 roster are within the top 5 in their positions. This isn't the case for any other team. Perhaps Vitality and G2 could rival them, but their in-game leaders don't frag nearly as well as Electronic. This is based on raw numbers and statistics. Of course, matches aren't won solely by fragging, but as you can notice, Cloud9 is the most formidable team in this regard. On paper, everything looks pretty ideal. The second strong side is that Cloud9 is a mix of experience, aim and chemistry. Remember what the main issue was with the previous Cloud9 lineup? They lost crucial matches and playoffs disastrously. The endless comebacks, lost overtimes, unanswered semifinals. The Cloud9 bosses must have gotten tired of it, which is why they brought 2 experienced warriors into the team. Previously in Cloud9 only Hobbit was the experienced player, a major champion with numerous lands played. However, the others struggled significantly, especially Exile. HLTV writes in their articles that Sergei is incredibly good in group stages and equally bad in playoffs. Given that a lot of the firepower rested on him, the Cloud9 squad lacked that firepower in crucial moments. With the arrival of Electronic and Perfecto, this aspect should be balanced. Additionally, it seemed like the players lacked confidence in crucial stages. Shiro would start tilting and closing up, Nefani's eyes would look empty, and Habit would try to say something, but the team has already checked out. Now, with 3 tier 1 scene monsters sitting beside you, the players who are more often in the finals and playoffs and lands than at home with their families, Shiro and Exile must give their all. And even if they slump, there's always Electronic and Perfecto to back them up. Furthermore, take any HLTV article about Electronic, he has one characteristic: he plays much better in the playoffs than in regular matches. Denis is the king of crucial games. It's because of that he secured a top 5 spot in 2020 despite being closer to top 10 based on his statistics. And don't forget how many times I've talked about Cloud9 being waist deep in mud and unable to do anything. We saw from Electronic's recent matches as the in-game leader how his mental game is top-notch. He can motivate everyone with words and the whole team just starts playing suddenly, while Perfecto is just a super chill and the anti-stress guy. But the most important factor is Hobbit. Remember the recent scandal with Nefani? They said there was too much noise in the team's comms before and Nefani lacked the guts and experience to control everyone. With Electronic that won't work. If Denis says something, it goes and it works. No one questions it or doubts it. And of all, this is not my words. It's what Hobbit and Shiro said. And since the captain has complete authority, there shouldn't be any turmoil in the team, at least not in the first few months. This results in an ideal balance of experience, aim and chemistry. Some players perform great in group stages, others in playoffs, some can take charge while others stay silent and obey. If everything works as it should, it's simply a dream lineup, again, on paper. Strong side number 3 is that they have perfect roles. Here, an HLTV article will help me, as it precisely breaks down the old and new positions for Cloud9 players. First of all, what were the issues with Buster and Nefani? Timur came to replace Inters, who was very consistent but lacked the star quality. However, Buster wasn't the best replacement in this aspect, because he played much less consistently. He could sometimes be second on the tab or clutch well, but if he slumped, he did it in top entirely. There were matches where his game just didn't work and opponents played around his position. Inter's was much more stable in this regard. As for Nefani, he's super aggressive, a powerful fragger, but there's a but. He used to be like that. As HLTV writes, in the last 18 months his fragging performance dropped significantly, and because of that the entire structure crumbled. When your aggressive player dies first every round, it's hard to build a winning streak. The replacements happened as closely matched as possible in terms of positions. Perfecto is Inter's but squared, even more stable and better in terms of fragging. He also performs the same dirty work perfectly. Electronic is a less aggressive player than Nefani, but he aims much better. All balanced. What about the exact positions and roles? HLTV prepared a table that shows the players' old roles. Let's start with the T side. Everything is simply perfect here. There are only 2-3 positions where players overlap, mainly with Perfecto, who has been playing more active roles in Navi lately. If we go back to the period when he won the major, things get even better. Perfecto played lurker role almost everywhere, and Exile also did, but on the other side of the map. Hobbit was given more active roles, and Electronic will have to play slightly more aggressive like Nefani, and Denise is really good at that. We've already seen how Cloud9 constructs their game. Exile and Perfecto provide width in the attack, while Electronic and Hobbit try to create chaos. In their last 2 tournaments, their T side failed only once against ENCE in Gamers8. They managed to secure only 1 round on Anubis there, but the issue wasn't entirely theirs. It was more due to Snappy's brilliant game reading and Dihas and Maiden's ideal decisions. In other matches, they took at least 5 rounds, and sometimes even 11 in the attack, so the roles and positions on the T side for Cloud9 are in perfect order. Now let's talk about the defense. Here too it's almost perfect, with just a couple of overlaps. For instance, Perfecto has recently been playing short on Mirage, just like Exile, and some of his positions overlap with Hobbits. But again, this is us talking about the new Perfecto, who has been given active roles in Navi. If we recall the golden times, he played as an anchor on B and fits perfectly into the current lineup. Electronic is also in his place, a few overlaps with Hobbit, but it's not critical. Conditionally, Hobbit played active positions on mid and ancient, and now he's been placed in the cave, the second most active point on the map. The same goes for Inferno. He used to be a support on B and now he'll be a support on A, 2 active points that are very similar. So no one needs to learn new positions or roles, everyone is in their comfort zone, and this once again proves what an excellent transfer this is on paper. Fourth strong side is Electronic's potential. He is a blend of multiple structures. Before the reshuffles, the main concerns were about Nefani. For example, against FaZe on IEM Dallas, they only secured 2 rounds on Mirage in attack and 1 on Inferno. Against Astralis at Brazi Party, they didn't secure a single round on Overpass in attack. It seemed like top teams had learned to counter all of Nefani's plays. Even Navi's analyst mentioned this in his interview, saying that preparing for Cloud9 was the easiest. Everything was by default and you could predict the round based on a single grenade thrown. And all those captaincy disputes, we've discussed that too. Clearly, Cloud9 needed a fresh perspective. They needed a leader who could guide these superstar guys. Yes, Electronic might not be the most experienced in this role, but remember Blade's words. He consistently said in all his interviews that Electronic has the potential to be the best captain in the world, and judging by how Cloud9 is playing in the attack now, Denise has real chances to take the place on the pedestal. Perhaps in CS2 we'll witness a meta of fragging IGLs, and then Astralis and Cloud9 will be ahead of the game. The next point is structure. It's also evident that the previous Cloud9 had seemingly reached their peak or just were stuck. They seemed to lack variety and creativity. Often they relied solely on aiming and shooting. If the kills came, they'd win. If not, they struggled a lot. Yes, this current lineup also relies on shooting, but as the players themselves say, give them time and they'll build a structure that will impress everyone. In his interviews, Electronic talks about wanting to take the best from Blade, Zeus, Boomwitch and Groove to build his own system, which might change the pro scene. There are very few players in history who have played under such diverse captains. Zeus led with experience and intuition, Blade with meticulous preparation and rigid structure, Boomwitch with with emotions and shooting, Groove with tactics and team play. So we're looking at a blend of absolutely different visions, and if they manage to merge them correctly, Cloud9 should establish their era pretty soon, with a thoughtful captain and the player selection in every position that Electronic has at his disposal. It's not without the reason that Flamey mentioned in a recent interview that Denise also made calls when Boomich was the captain. He felt the game, he took everything upon himself and then always won. I also remember Blade's interview with Thorin. He praised Electronic for over 10 minutes when he wasn't even the captain yet. He talked about how great Denise is at reading opponents, and that if he finds himself on the map, they never lose in those situations. He's a true playmaker who can single-handedly break the defense or stop the attack. Now, all that's left is to bring it all together, improve, gain experience, and theoretically we could have a captain who knows how to shoot and who can dismantle the strongest teams with ingenious decisions. With such a player selection in every position, Electronic has the tools to make it happen. Strong side number 5, reduced community hate and a pleasant vibe in the team. This might not be the most obvious advantage, but I believe it's quite significant. When the war began, the Natas Vincere audience became highly divided, which is quite logical. Some demanded that Electronic and Perfecto should be removed, while others wanted Electronic and Perfecto to leave the organization themselves. There was a lot of hate coming from all sides. Even when there were victories, there were still dissatisfied individuals who would spoil the triumph. Understandably, the guys are experienced and know how to detach, but remember how Guardian was destroyed in his time. How people criticized SDY and the immense pressure that fell on NPL. This happened both externally and within the team. Moreover, due to all the political undertones, Electronic and Perfecto almost disappeared from Navi's YouTube channel and the team's Instagram. They had minimal media activities, minimal interviews, and so on. Also, let's not forget about the atmosphere within the team, with all the constant reshuffles, role changes, and simple just ruining rookies' morale. Can you recall how many times they argued between themselves, I mean Simple and Perfecto? Remember SDY, who left this toxic atmosphere and just flourished? You can hardly recognize him, he just smiles and enjoys the life. And after leaving the environment, he just skyrocketed together with Monte. Now, regarding the atmosphere and the vibes within the team, it seems like both orgs have profited in some way. The pressure on Navi regarding Electronic and Perfecto is gone, and Cloud9 gained a bunch of new fans. Of course, it's the honeymoon period now, and it's hard to predict how it will be in the future, but for now, the atmosphere within the team is almost perfect. Minimal toxicity, maximum enjoyment and fun. Even ESL trolled Perfecto, saying that now Shiro laughs in the voice chat instead of simple shouting. Everyone sees how the guys are having fun in the game, and the community is giving them warm support. Yes, of course, in CS hate is unavoidable, but it seems that there's much less of it after the transfer. And all this should positively impact on the team's results. And I can't identify any more strong sides. In terms of structure and professionalism, Cloud9 probably doesn't significantly surpass Navi. Both orgs have a large number of staff, psychologists, managers and so on, so I don't think much will change in that regard. The biggest difference between these two teams is the roster management. In Navi, it's total control by Blade. In Cloud9, it's joint work by Groove and Finn. I can't really say if that's good or bad. On one hand, I like Groove. He gives more freedom, he works well on team play, and Finn skillfully analyzes opponents' weaknesses. But it seems to me that Groove lacks emotion. Yes, not everyone needs someone like Robin or Zonek behind them, but as we've seen from their departure, both FaZe and Astralis suffered heavily. However, no matter how I look at it, Groove just sits behind the players throughout the match and provides hints, but I don't see him heavily influencing the game. He just doesn't look too strict, and I'm not sure that he can motivate them at the right moment or calm them down. So I won't say that he's stronger than Blade for sure, but I won't say he's worse or weaker either. As Electronic says, Blade wants too much control, and with Groove he might open up in an entirely new way. And of course the fact that there's no Simple in Cloud9 is both good and bad. On one hand, Shiro is undoubtedly a strong fragger, but he's not yet at prime Simple's level. He's not as aggressive, he can't single-handedly win rounds, opponents don't fear him as much. You can build the entire game around Simple, which Navi does. However, Shiro is much more friendly and cheerful and team-based. He rarely complains, he isn't toxic, he doesn't tilt anyone. He can't emotionally destroy a teammate in a tough moment. He won't aggressively solo peak or leave the team outnumbered. He's a more passive AWPer, better compared to Device. And as we can see, this setup is much more effective for majors. You know, Device won 4 of them, while aggressive and fierce snipers like Zyvo and Simple have won only 1 each. The key is how Electronic can utilize this. He and Simple once formed the world's best duo, frightening everyone else around. Now he'll have to do this with Shiro, and it might either not work at all or overshadow the previous star duo. Certainly the team atmosphere will be much better, but saying that the lineup is stronger without Simple, it's just nonsense. The 3-time best player in the world will enhance absolutely any team, but whether Cloud9 needs such a star who takes the spotlight is an open question. All these strong sides show us that Cloud9 has assembled almost perfect blend of shooting, experience, chemistry, freedom and potential. If Electronic and Groove manage to find a balanced combination, this team might be even feared by Gabe himself. They could easily establish their era and win all the upcoming CS2 championships outright. But of course, not everything can be so perfect. This lineup has many downsides and potential problems. Now let's discuss all those aspects.
Friends, I have another fantastic news for you. My partner, MyCSGO, gives away free cases. What do you need to do? Well, it's as simple as possible. Just add $2 to your account. Well, the more you top up, the more free cases you get, and they drop 3 at a time. I haven't seen such generosity yet, and if you get skins of no interest, you can immediately trade them in a contract or upgrade to get an amazing skin. You can repeat that every day. The website has a special provably fair system so that you can check any operation, everything is open. They have been in the game since forever and you can find thousands of reviews on Google. The bonuses don't end there. You can receive a gift every day and by using my unique promo code in the pinned comment you will get additional one. Also, if you use live news as a promo code you will get up to 40% bonus for all your top-ups. It's just too good to be true, isn't it? But here we are. Click on the link in the pinned comment to get it all. Thank you, my dear kind friends, for watching the ad. Let's move on.
The first weak side, Electronic as in-game leader and partnership with Groove. This is, of course, the very first and the very obvious downside. While in the positives we talked about his potential to become one of the best in the world, at the moment we can't say that for sure. You know, he was easily outplayed by Dexter in the very first match, and then he was easily read by Snappy at Gamers8. Quite often, Electronic makes not that optimal decisions, especially regarding calls before rounds. There have been instances where he called a fast push and they got caught without a chance. However, with mid calls, things are better. In any case, during each match's broadcast chat, you'll see thousands of messages suggesting that Electronic shouldn't be the captain. They say his aim is not as it was before, that he dropped from top 5 to top 30, he lacks experience, he's often too emotional, and it's currently unclear how he'll build up the structure without Blade. In Navi, as we know, everything is on Blade. Essentially, any player can be the captain and call, and it will work more or less the same. In Cloud9, the approach is quite different. Groove has less influence on the team's gameplay, they don't have as many tactics and strategies prepared on paper. We can see that Cloud9's gameplay is more focused on shooting and map control, while Navi relies heavily on the pre-planned structure. Who throws the grenades, who checks the angles, who picks and all that. So essentially we haven't seen Electronic's full-fledged captaincy yet. Now he'll have to rebuild almost everything from scratch. But can he manage without Blade? Can he establish a common language with Groove, with Shiro, Exile and most importantly Hobbit? What will happen after the honeymoon phase? Will they continue to trust him after a series of mistakes? And most importantly, look at the teams currently at the top. Vitality has the super experienced Apex. Before becoming the in-game leader, he spent nearly 10 years in the pro scene, and now he's been in IGL for more than 3 years, and only recently have we truly seen him embrace this role. Heroic has the experienced leadership of Cadian, no need to say more. He leads the guys like a pack leader, pushing them forward, showing super consistency, yes. Then there's G2 with Hooksy. Yes, he's a meme, but in terms of leadership, he has much more experience than Electronic. ENCE is captained by Snappy. The situation here is even more interesting, a young talent captaining for so long that Denise has never ever dreamt of. FaZe is led by the true in-game leader monster Kerrigan, there's no point in comparing them. As we can see, the current meta features not young and fierce captains like Electronic or Blamef, but rather seasoned, experienced wolves. They have been playing CS ever since it was born. They have children, grandchildren, and they're still playing, leading, and winning. Maybe with the release of CS2 everything will change, but for now Electronic has a colossal task ahead of him. He has to surpass these captains. Can he do it? Is it even necessary? Maybe they should have stick to Navi or bring someone like Boomic instead. The second weak side. Structural changes, Exile and Shiro no longer stars of the lineup. The core of Cloud9 is Habit, Exile and Shiro. They played most of their careers under one captain, and within the same structure, made only some changes to players, but it didn't greatly affect their team play. Now, two new teammates with entirely different styles, perspectives on the game, experience and knowledge has joined the team. How compatible are these systems? Is it possible that Exile or Shiro might find it incredibly challenging to adapt to the new team? Or can they even maintain the previous level of performance? Exile and Shiro will no longer be the stars of the team. These are not my words, but Electronic's. In an interview he mentioned that they won't play for someone, they won't operate like Navi, where everything resolves around simple. How will this impact these young stars? Moreover, Habit will have to play new roles. We can already see shifts in some maps. For example, he was placed in the cave on Ancient and he struggled against Ents. Every round was an open kill onto a buy, and then the attack progressed without a chance. All these are the consequences of a complete team overhaul. And Exile hasn't shown the same stats as before. Over the last 3 months he had a rating of 1.09. In the new lineup he hasn't achieved anything higher than 1.08 and usually just floats below 0. It's clear that we've only seen a couple of matches and can't draw conclusions from them, but what if this is now Exile's standard performance level? And he simply couldn't adapt to Electronic's new structure. Also, can Shiro maintain his previous level? In general, these guys have an immense amount of work ahead of them, and it's far from certain that they'll manage to overcome all the forthcoming challenges. They might lack experience, resilience, character, or even face hate, and this is how we systematically transition to the next downside. Third weak side, Habit's complex personality. Honestly, I never really thought much about this. We're all accustomed to making jokes about Habit's noble actions and how Abai praised opponents after matches and how Abai seems to be soft and fluffy. But as practice shows within the team, Habit is quite the wild wolf. You can't mess with him or he'll bite back. We all remember how the triumphant Gambit roster fell apart. According to Zeus's words, it all started when he and Kane couldn't attend Habit's wedding. The guys communicated among themselves and decided to kick the coach without the captain's involvement, without proper discussions. Rumor has it Abai was the initiator. Then there were recent conflicts between Navi and Habit also. Abai mentioned that many of the issues in the past Cloud9 lineups were due to the captain, stating that he lacked experience, wasn't listened to. How could he lead the team when there are players far more experienced and knowledgeable about CS? We don't really know what happens in the internal kitchen, but it seems that Habit could potentially stir players against the captain or even the coach. If the new lineup doesn't perform well, tensions could escalate again, resulting in power struggles and internal conflicts. While I'm fairly certain that Exile and Perfecto won't challenge authority or disrupt the team balance, I can't say the same with confidence about Habit or Shiro. Yes, the team doesn't have a player like Simple, which makes it easier for Electronic, but Simple at least immediately voices concerns and is toxic only during games. In real life, people say he's calm and friendly. In Gambit and Cloud9, as we see, issues mostly originated outside of the game. I have no intent to accuse Habit or say he's a bad person or anything. No, Abai is a great guy and I really like him. These are all just the theories from the community, but let's agree, where there's fire, there's smoke. Weakness number 4. Enormous responsibility because of the price and community expectations. As we know, Cloud9 has already spent over $3 million to assemble this roster. They first bought the entire Gambit team approximately for $1 million and then added another $2 million on top for Perfecto and Electronic. So it's basically probably one of the most expensive CS teams in history. And if you think that this doesn't exert pressure on the players, just ask football players. There are plenty of examples where players were bought for hundreds of millions of dollars and they mentally destroyed themselves when they didn't perform well. For Cloud9, everything was relatively fine. They might not have been winning, but they reached the EPL finals. They often made it to the playoffs and consistently held a top 6. Essentially, it's a very stable and solid Tier 1 team, something many would envy. However, for Cloud9's bosses, this wasn't enough. They wanted victories, they wanted a world #1 team. Can you imagine the pressure this puts on the players? They need to do more than just play well, they need to surpass their past achievements. So now, being a stable top 5 team will be considered weak. When you buy stars like this, you're playing to win multiple tournaments at least, and ideally establish your era and secure an Intel Grand Slam. Judging by the interviews, the players themselves set such goals. Yes, they're in the honeymoon phase right now, getting accustomed, finding their groove. No one is demanding much from them, but in EPL, for instance, everyone expects them to make at least to the semi-finals. Anything below that is a failure. And imagine if they don't succeed, how much hate will the community unleash? And more importantly, how players will feel about themselves. This directly affects their gameplay. Here's an example. Cloud9 is playing a match to proceed from the groups, let's say against NIP. Overtime comes and your slightest mistake could cost your team a spot in the playoffs. In such a moment, you're not just afraid to make aggressive plays, you're afraid of saying something unnecessary. You know that $2 million were spent on you, and you know the community will destroy you if you lose right now. And playing under such stress is incredibly difficult. Yes, all the guys are experienced, yes, they have top-notch psychologists, but in any case, this pressure won't just evaporate without a trace. And judging by the start, the community is not forgiving Cloud9 for the slightest mistakes. After a loss, you read comments like, "Is the Cloud9 era already over or it hasn't even begun? And you kicked Navi for this? Who made Electronic the captain? This lineup is worth $3 million? My teammates at level 8 play better. Our CS community is merciless. Give us a reason and we won't forget it." Naturally, this creates some pressure and it's up to the players to overcome it and showcase their abilities at 100%, or face a failure that might jeopardize their careers. Let's hope the guys have enough experience and character to shut down all the haters. Weak side number 5. CS2 and no Blast. Currently, it's still unclear when CS2 will be released, but it will undoubtedly shake up the pro scene. Many believe that Simple won't remain the same, m0NESY will quickly push the old guard aside, and even newcomers like Mouse could dominate in the early stages of the new game. In reality, anything can happen. Such a massive overhaul hasn't occurred for over 10 years, the last being the transition from CS 1.6 to CSGO, which caused significant changes. For instance, GetRight, who dominated everyone in the early days of CSGO, later admitted in the interviews that he was one of the first to transition to the new game. He got used to the shooting mechanics, grenades, and excelled without competition. Once everyone caught up, he couldn't maintain his previous level. There are a lot of pro players sitting without teams playing CS2 on Faceit all day long, and they could become the new stars in the next few months. And while others play EPL and Cologne on CSGO, these players are training in the new game. It's unclear how this transition will impact the new Cloud9. They're already undergoing a complete overhaul, and now the game itself is changing, not dramatically but still globally. Slight shifts in the shooting mechanics, servers and hit registration are different, grenades have become even more crucial and challenging, and so on. When you're dealing with a plethora of potential problems, team dynamics, tactics, strategies, gaining experience, and even strategizing to outplay more experienced captains, Valve throws CS2 into the mix, and all of this could result in a massive snowball effect. One problem leads to another, then to the third, and suddenly Hobbit starts brewing intrigues within the team. So a powerful team with incredible prospects might encounter insurmountable difficulties and crumble before our eyes. Of course, I'm painting the most negative scenario, but theoretically it still could happen. And finally, they don't have a Blast slot. Valve is trying to intervene and major changes are expected in 2025. But until then, the team might not make it. Just recently, news broke that Cloud9 will have to play online qualifiers for Blast, which will end just before the EPL group stage. This basically means that instead of fully preparing for the tournament, the players will have to participate in online qualifiers. To put it into perspective, Electronic hasn't played online qualifiers for over 5 years. All because of Navi, as they always had invites and didn't need to effort in that grinder. This directly affects preparation, in-game performance and ultimately results. So while the rest of the top HLTV teams will be mastering new tactics in CS2, Cloud9 will be watching on Twitch and simultaneously playing practice games against tier 2 teams, because all the tier 1 teams will be engaged with Blast. I hope Cloud9 management will come up with something, maybe buy a slot from a Blast partner like EG. However, from a business standpoint, that wouldn't be the most favorable solution. You've spent significant money on the roster, then on the slot, and then suddenly Valve introduces new rules and all your investments go down the drain. And if Cloud9 doesn't even go through qualifiers, which is quite possible, they might end up skipping about 5 tier 1 tournaments per year. That's nearly half of the CS tournaments in a year. In 2022, Cloud9 played half as much as other teams, and the cost of mistakes become even higher. While G2, who could embarrass themselves in the ESL Pro League but then win a Blast without a hitch, pleasing fans and management, Cloud9, if they stumble in EPL, will have to wait for the next ESL tournament, which doesn't occur as frequently as Blast events. To me, this is one of the biggest and most painful drawbacks. As of now, EG can change their roster 500 times in 1 month and still have their rightful slot, while non-Blast partners are deprived of such privilege. Electronic probably isn't even accustomed to playing so little. There can be months-long gaps between ESL tournaments, which affects your form. See, you can develop great strategies, but what can you do if you're not as warmed up as the others? Perhaps during these breaks the players will participate in less important tournaments like Home Sweet Home or various CCT series. Surely Electronic, Perfecto and the rest would be astonished, but that's the reality. As we can see, there could be numerous challenges for the team, but in my opinion there are slightly still more pros than cons. I personally believe in this roster slightly more than in Navi's. Perhaps we won't witness an era, but I think we'll see several semifinals and finals. Currently, there are probably only 3 teams that are super stable and extremely hard to beat: Vitality, Heroic and ENCE. The rest of the HLTV is super shaky. G2 could dominate or crash out without chances in a couple of days. The same applies to FaZe and Navi. It's also unclear what Astralis will show next, how VP and Liquid will perform and what to expect from the guys from MAU. Cloud9 has a long journey to the podium ahead of them. They have both numerous potential problems and opportunities. Only time will reveal the actual outcome. Feel free to comment if you disagree with something, if I missed something, or if I didn't provide enough details. Your opinions are really interesting and important to me. If you enjoy this experimental type of content, please give it a like, so I'll know how to mix news with other diverse topics. Anyways, I'll be back with the news. See you soon.